Hi everyone. So what I've assembled for you this week in terms of a lecture is a combined comparison of successful Democratic strategies to win the presidency and Republican strategies to win the presidency. And what I've done is I have surveyed what I think are the dominant patterns in the arguments, the rhetoric, the metaphors and speeches and the campaign commercials, the imagery in those commercials of Republicans and Democrats, starting with successful Democrats with Kennedy in 1960 and concluding with Obama in 2012, and then by contrast on the Republican side, beginning with Nixon in 1968 and concluding with George W. Bush in 2008. What I think I've found is, or the thesis that I'll argue for you and then produce evidence hopefully to back that thesis up, is that when Republicans win, they typically win by using one central strategy, and that is to masculinize, in a sense, strengthen their own self, their own persona, as protectors of the nation. And in many senses, they campaign as sort of manly, rugged cowboys, manly men. And then to feminize, weaken their opponent by talking about how Democrats are, in a sense, emotional, they are incapable of the cold rationality needed for the presidency. By contrast, Democrats use a very different notion of masculinity, a much more negative notion of masculinity, and they use a very different notion of femininity, a much more positive, protective notion of femininity when they win the presidency. And so for Democrats, successful Democrats often cast themselves as protective nurturers of the nation, of all of the different parts of the nation, all the different demographics of the nation, and caring not just for the wealthy amongst the nation, but also those in different stratas amongst the nation. And then they cast Republicans, by much contrast, as aggressive hyper bullies who are quick to jump into any conflict and not very quick to reason through problems, not very quick to collaborate with people in reasoning through those problems. So that is, in a nutshell, the thesis, that when Republicans win, they win as the rugged cowboy, and they successfully cast the Democratic opponent as hysterical or weak or emotional, and that when Democrats win, they often win because they are seen as protective nurturers, caregivers for the nation, and the Republicans, by contrast, are aggressive brutes who are not caring about all of the different factions in the nation that they should be. A couple different caveats. First, I'm painting with a broad brush here, and so I know that there's exceptions, and I'm interested to get your take on the thesis that I'm forwarding to you, and so that's going to be the topic for this week's discussion prompt. Second, in many cases I've tried to find perfect examples or suitable examples for each of the individual different arguments that I make. Oftentimes those are campaign commercials, so there's a visual and oral component to the evidence that I'm providing, but because Prezi doesn't allow you to embed anything that's not a YouTube video, these are external links to living room candidate sites, and so you'll have to click the URL. It's a little cumbersome, but it's the best way to work it. My apologies there. But what I haven't done is to assemble all of the different examples that you could use. So I think that you could create a much more unwieldy and larger, perhaps even a book on a subject like this, by using all the different examples to prove these individual points. But what I've done is to just try to give you a few different examples, in some cases only one, in some cases two or three, to prove each individual point. So take it all in, and let's hash out how we feel about this argument about the masculinity and femininity amongst successful Republican and Democratic contenders for the presidency in the modern era.